This is our organizational meeting, so that means that I'll get the meeting started, so please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Again, it's an organizational meeting, so my job is to get the meeting started. A couple of things I want the audience to remember is, remember to be kind to each other, treat each other with respect, and it's not something that we would want to do is to ask you to leave, so please be respectful, and we appreciate that you're here to participate in a business meeting in front of the public, all right? Second thing is, we are lacking two members tonight. We got notice that Ms. Glaybach and Mr. Gugleski were not able to attend tonight. And so one of the things, the first thing we have to do is elect officers. So the key is that you have to have 4 votes. It has to be a majority of the board, not a majority of the quorum. So the majority of the board makes decisions. So if you have 4 votes in one way, then that's where the vote goes. So we will try to get a president tonight. We did check with the attorneys. You do not have to be present to be nominated and accept a position, as long as there are individuals that are aware that you're willing to do that position. So we will work on that. The hopes is that we will get a president. I'll be able to turn it over to the president. If we do not get a president tonight, that's fine. What we will do is just put the voting of officers to the next meeting, and we will stay status quo for this meeting, but continue with the meeting because there is business to be done at the board table. All right? So just wanted to let you know that. So the first order of business, as we've been called to order, is, are there any nominations for the office of president?
I nominate Megan Glaybach for president.
Ms. Shaw nominates Ms. Glaybach as board president. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Costa. I know that I talked with Mrs. Glaybach, and she is more than willing to take on the role of president again. And I think, Kristen, you have reached out to her as well. All right. So once the nomination is tendered, of course, are there any other nominations for president of the board? No other nominations for president of the board, so we will vote then on the nomination that is standing. If we could get a vote on yes or no for President Glaybach. We'll start with Ms. Shaw.
Yes.
Ms. Shaw is a yes. Ms. Coleman.
Yes.
Ms. Coleman is a yes. Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Costa is a yes. Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mr. Keller is a yes. Ms. Blondil.
Yes.
Ms. Blondil is a yes. That's a 5-0 vote. That is a majority of the board. Ms. Glaybach is the president moving into the next year. Now we have to go to the vice president. Again, same thing. If we can get a vice president today, then we move forward with the vice president taking over, looking for a treasurer and a secretary. If we don't get a vice president, we'll go back to status quo until Ms. Glaybach gets back, and she will pick up the nominations and the seating of officers at the next meeting. So I'm looking for a nomination for vice president.
I nominate Greg for vice president.
Okay. Ms. Blondil nominates Greg Keller as vice president. Is there a second?
I don't think we need a second.
Okay, we don't need a second. There you go. All right, so we have Greg Keller as a nomination for vice president. Are there any other nominations for vice president?
I nominate Kristen Coleman for vice president.
Okay. Mr. Costa nominates Kristen Coleman for vice president. Are there any other nominations for vice president? Okay, then we go back to the original nomination first. So the original nomination is Mr. Keller for vice president. We will start again with Ms. Shaw. Ms. Shaw, a yes or a no in regards to Mr. Keller as vice president?
No.
A no by Mrs. Shaw. Mrs. Coleman?
No.
No by Mrs. Coleman. Mr. Costa?
No.
A no by Mr. Costa. Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Yes by Mr. Keller. Mrs. Blondil?
Yes.
Yes by Mrs. Blondil. That motion fails because it did not get a majority of the vote. Okay, so we go to the second nomination. Okay, second nomination is for
Excuse
Mrs.
me, I interrupt. Is there any discussion?
There usually isn't at this point because we're just doing the nominations of officers. If you have a comment, go ahead, feel
I
free.
just had a question.
Sure.
And it was for Mrs. Coleman. I wanted to say thank you very much for your input on the policy or the bathroom wording. I appreciate that very much. So, I wanted Greg, but if it comes down to it, I will vote for you for doing that, for helping protect children. So thank you very much for that.
Okay. Any other? All right, so this vote is for Ms. Coleman to be the vice president. So we'll start with Ms. Shaw. Ms. Shaw, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes by Ms. Shaw. Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Yes by Ms. Coleman. Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Yes by Mr. Costa. Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Yes by Mr. Keller and Ms. Blondeel?
Yes.
Yes by Ms. Blondeel. So that means it's a unanimous vote, majority of the board. So Ms. Coleman, you are the vice president. So I turn the gavel over to you. You have it. Your job is to look for a treasurer and a secretary.
Thank you very much. All right, so next up is treasurer. Are there any nominations for treasurer?
I nominate Chris Costa for treasurer.
Okay, Mrs. Shaw nominates Mr. Costa, and I don't believe we need a second for formal policy. Okay. Are there any other nominations for treasurer?
Yes, I nominate Greg.
Okay. Mrs. Blondeel nominates Greg Keller for treasurer. Are there any other nominations? Okay, we'll put it to a vote for Chris Costa, as he was the first nomination for treasurer. Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
No.
Mrs. Blondeel?
No.
I am a yes. So that doesn't carry. Then for Mr. Costa, or I'm sorry, for Mr. Keller as treasurer. Mrs. Shaw?
No.
Mr. Costa?
No.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
And Mrs. Blondeel?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a no. So both of those are a no vote, which means this will end the nominations for officers. We'll pick up with treasurer and secretary at the next meeting when hopefully we have a full quorum and we can get more votes. Okay.
I guess just as a point of order, technically in the agenda, we do have secretary was the third item, which we bypassed.
Do you know, Mr. Hughes, if we are supposed to do them in a specific order?
I don't know.
There's no law that says you have to do a specific order.
Okay.
Renee, do you know?
No, you don't have to. I think you're saying we didn't vote for a secretary, correct? Is that what you're
We're
asking?
just following the agenda.
Yeah, I was just saying we didn't follow the.
Yeah, I jumped to treasurer and skipped secretary.
I don't think it'll hurt you if you want to take nominations for secretary and see
We
if you
can.
get a secretary.
I'm game.
Okay.
Okay, so let's do this for secretary. Are there any nominations for secretary?
I nominate Glenn Gogolewski for
Okay,
secretary.
Mrs. Blondeel nominates Glenn Gogolewski for secretary.
Support.
Are there any other nominations?
I nominate Cindy Shaw.
Okay, Mr. Costa nominates Cindy Shaw. Are there any other nominations? Okay, all right, so in order, Glenn Gogolewski for secretary. Mrs. Shaw?
No.
Mr. Costa?
No.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Ms. Blondeel?
Yes.
I am a no. So that one does not fly. And then second up was Cindy Shaw for secretary. Mrs.
Yes.
Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
No.
Mrs. Blondeel?
No.
And I am a yes. Okay, so neither one of those went, but thank you for pointing that out, Greg. We'll pick those up next time. All right, item 1C, approval of agenda items for discussion.
I move that the Board of Education, I move that the Board of Education for the, I move that the agenda for the July 22nd, 2024 organizational meeting be approved.
Support.
My
Easy-
goodness.
Easy for you to say.
I don't know.
All right, motion by Mr. Costa, supported by Mrs. Shaw. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right. Hearing no discussion, Mrs. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mrs. Blondeel,
Yes.
and I am a yes. That passes. Consent agenda.
I move that the consent agenda for the July 22, 2024 organizational meeting be approved.
Support.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Shaw, support by Mr. Costa. Is there any discussion on the motion?
So just want to make some observations. So in the packet today, the MHSAA resolution was omitted accidentally from the packet. So for the community members, we did receive that. So it is very similar to what we voted on last year. So if you need a template, you could certainly look at that. So thank you, Mr. Hughes and Renee, for getting that added prior to the meeting. I also did want to just kind of highlight to my fellow board members that there are a couple dates that February 17th meeting does fall on President's Day. March 17th obviously is St. Patrick's Day, and then the May 19th is technically the third Monday, but we scheduled it for the 12th, so I didn't know if there was a specific reason that we skipped to try to keep our standard cadence, if we wanted to consider changing that before we officially vote on the consent agenda. I'm sure you would entertain a motion to pull that out of the consent agenda.
Yeah, you wouldn't even need to make a motion to pull it out. You could just
I would say, I
request that
think we
be
moved it,
here.
I'm just looking at last month's, it's because the May 19th is the last week of school. And I thought maybe we wanted to have everything
Yeah, with finals and all of that.
finalized prior to that last
Was-
week. That's why, that's what I've got from last.
Okay.
And the President's Day, though it does fall on a national holiday, it's not a school holiday. It's not one that's like, there is school in session that day.
Okay, so I guess we can just proceed with it as is in the consent agenda.
And we did make sure not to do MLK Day this year, so we did listen.
Yes, we checked.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Mrs. Shaw, consent agenda.
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Blondeel.
Yes.
And I am a yes. That passes. Item 1E, Superintendent's Report. Mr. Hughes?
Yes, thank you very much. So here we are. Couple of dates just to put down on your calendars. Remember that there is a new opening district breakfast on August 12th in the morning at the high school cafeteria. That's where we invite all of our employees to come back to school. We serve breakfast at 8 o'clock. It'll open, I think we start serving at 7:30 actually and start the program at 8. We try to get out of there by 9:30 at the latest. And so we would love to have all the board members there. Feel free to come and talk and be a part of that opening day breakfast. We also then, just a reminder that school starts on the morning of the 14th. I also want the board to know, if you haven't seen it already, I know I've let the community know, we are working on some transportation adjustments, as we've talked about. We'll have all of the community members that are sending their children on buses will get their bus cards Wednesday, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday, August 6th or 7th. And then we're going to have a meeting here in this room on August 8th with transportation, with Matt Marino and myself, to answer any questions about transportation based on the information that people get. And so it's going to look a little different than in the past, but remember, we're trying to be more efficient. And again, I've already put all this information out to the public. All of our parents know what to expect coming forward, but that'll be a chance to come and at least talk with us and for us to be present, all right? So just wanted to remind you of that. And then, of course, opening day for students is going to be the 14th. So we'll be here before you know it. Next, I want to introduce new hires, so I'll ask principals to bring your new hires up. So we'll start with, I got to find my sheet here. We'll start with Michelle Blythe. Mr. Howerton?
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to introduce you to Michelle Blythe. We had an opening for a special education position at HMS, and as you know, it seems to get tougher every year to find amazing people for this amazing district, and we were very fortunate to find Michelle. Michelle came from nearby Fowlerville. She's been at Kensington Woods. She's been a special education teacher for over 13 years, has team taught middle school through high school, ELA, math, biology. She's kind of done it all. And I think what resonated most with us, with the interview team, was just the fact that she stressed how important it was for her to connect with kids. And when I called a number of her references, people she had worked with presently or in the past, they said the same thing. She's all about connecting with kids, making those connections. She's fabulous. One of her coworkers said, I was afraid I was going to get a call. I didn't want to lose her. She was great to co-teach with. And, they said one of her strengths was certainly building relationships and, getting super connected to kids and their success. So I think we've found a great fit for Hartland with Michelle. I'm really excited to have her at HMS.
Hi, my name is Michelle Blythe, and I'm very excited to join the community of Hartland Schools and to join the team over at Orr Creek Middle School. I plan to use my strengths in math and English and my success in building relationships with students to bring students to a higher level and to get them prepared for high school in those subjects.
Awesome.
And success overall. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Mr. Reck?
Didn't want to whack her with her. I didn't want her to squish it. No.
Good evening, everyone. I am very excited to welcome Jenna Ling to the Village team. Jenna had a whirlwind week. She got a call from Village Elementary on a Tuesday, did a phone interview with me. She did a Zoom interview with our team on Thursday. She graduated from DePaul University on Saturday and drove up on Tuesday to meet her new boss. So blew us away. Our interview team, when you do a lot of interviews and you're the principal and you walk the candidates out, and if you really like somebody and you're walking back, you're like, gosh, I hope the team liked them as much as I did. And when the team's like, we're done, we turned off that Zoom and we knew we found our new Village teacher. So I'm really excited to welcome Jenna. She's a student athlete at DePaul, and she's going to be a great fit for Village Elementary. So welcome, Jenna.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to join the Hartland community and the Village team.
Good evening, everybody. I am so happy to introduce Christina Miller. Christina will be joining the Lakes team as a third grade teacher this coming year. She comes to us with 7 years of teaching experience in Milan, where she was grade level lead and a mentor teacher for some of her colleagues in her building. Her experience using units of study and working with her colleagues to implement small groups and monitor progress are a couple of the reasons that we knew that she was the right fit for Lakes. So I am super excited about the experiences that she brings to our Hartland team. And welcome, Christina.
I'm Christina Miller, and I'm very excited to join the Lakes Elementary team. Thank you.
And Ms. Hodam.
So I just have to say before I interview my recommendation that I also interviewed Christina Miller and was very impressed. I had 4 incredible candidates. It was really tough. This is Juliana Spagnolo, who we decided to offer the position to. She is now Bernard. So since I interviewed her, she's been married. Husband Dominic is here. She taught for 4 years in Livonia. 4th and 2nd grade. She'll be joining our 3rd grade team. She lives in Howell. It's close to home. She's been in Howell, born and raised in Howell, went to Mr. Hughes' elementary school. She's a great fit. Throughout her interview, we heard about collaboration, relationships, and reflective teaching, and that's what we need. So she's excited for our tight-knit community, and we're excited for her. So here she is.
I just want to say thank you for this opportunity, and I'm extremely looking forward to continuing my career here in Hartland.
Thank you all. New hires, you are free to leave, so don't feel like you have to stay. Thank you for being here. Mr. Rack, elementary principals, could you do me a favor and just hang out just for a few minutes until we get to the handbook, just in case there's any questions on the rubrics that are in there, if you would? Thank you so much. So ends the superintendent. Oh, no, it doesn't. I got Matt. We got a bond update. Sorry, Matt. Hopefully we didn't have any water springing all over the place today, like in the past the last week.
We're getting those fixed, so. We've had some crazy 100-year rains. Let's see here. Okay, so summer bond update. First, I want to say the maintenance department and custodial department have been super busy getting the buildings ready for the next school year. A lot of people don't realize this, but we only have roughly 57 days to clean and maintain 1 million square feet. So we have a great team that's been really kicking it, working very hard. As Mrs. Hodam said, Dottie, her building was looking fabulous today for summer school, which they have done a great job getting everything ready for summer school, which started today. So a little bit early before school, but bond has been going on. Construction's been continuing. We've been doing a lot of roofing replacements, as well as we found additional roofing projects to work on with my general fund money. As Mr. Hughes said, unfortunately, again, we have roughly 900,000 square feet of roofing material, but we're doing roofing replacement at the high school on all the asphalt areas. We're doing Creekside, and we're doing a section of farms. There's a back section there, and then we're doing the entire building of 51. 51 is a little bit of a challenge just because that daycare is in operation, so we've been working with the daycare to move people around. We have not started yet. We were supposed to do that last week on Tuesday. Then we got the heavy rainfall, and so they had to pull off that job. But we will work with the daycare to finish that project. Doing parking lot replacement. The Creekside, I call it the Creekside lot, but behind the home bleachers was done early in the summer. Luckily, with school getting out, contractors really look forward to doing our projects because they can get started before every other district. So we got finished with that parking lot pretty early. We are paving out the student lot right now, and with anticipation of being done August 1st. That's all weather dependent, but that is our push because we know obviously there's going to be registration and those things happening at the high school. We're doing some mechanical upgrades, so we're replacing the boilers at Creekside, replacing some HVAC units on the gym over at Farms. That's that rooftop unit with the crane that we had to lift up on there. Everything is scheduled for being done at the start of school on those. And then we upgraded the lighting at Rounds Gym and the hallway. That was pretty dark, and we were able to update those with some LED fixtures, which looks fabulous. We are doing an upgrade on the tennis courts. This actually has been a question, I think, from a few people in the community. We are actually replacing a set of courts, but we are also reconditioning the other half of courts. So we've been working with the athletic department and the tennis coach to be done for tryouts, which is August 12th. We are on task for that, thank goodness. But when we're all done, all the courts will be refinished with new paint and new lines and looking good for the season. And that's pretty much the construction for this season. Any questions?
No, I just have a comment. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you and your team for all of the hard work. We appreciate it very much.
I will definitely share that with them. Thank you for
Please
saying
do.
that. Anything else? Cool.
Thank you, Matt. So ends the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. All right, moving on to call to the public. Item 1F. No, I've got one, thank you. As always, speakers are asked to express themselves in a civil manner with due respect for the dignity and privacy of others who may be affected by your comments. Each speaker may be limited to 3 minutes. No participant may speak more than once. If you choose to speak out during call to the public or disrupt in any way, you may be asked to leave. I'll have a timer up here, which you'll hear when it hits 3 minutes. And when you're about 30 seconds out, I'll hold up your yellow card. First up is Julie.
Good evening. I just wanted to reiterate what I had sent most of you after last meeting so that there is clear documentation for those individuals and organizations who are interested in pursuing litigation regarding the shady basis for the bathroom policy, which is clearly being pushed through for no actual reason, proving to become a pattern in our district as you previously created school policy to strip supportive symbols, with the basis being that there was an alternative sticker, which is obviously proven to not be true. Side note, Blondell stated the quiet part out loud about 8805 on the podcast that it was actually about getting pride flags out of the school. But anyways, Angela Yarber on October 28th, 23, on her campaign page posted an announcement that transgender students using the restrooms in Hartland schools is a huge safety issue and her slate's main agenda. There was little to no concern about transgender students using the bathrooms prior to this post. The emails and the social media posts clearly show how public outrage was drummed up by using misinformation and fear of rape and sexual assault as the motivator to rile her base into speaking out in support of it. After help from far-right political activists blasting calls to action around the state and Mr. Gogoleski urging the community to, quote, make noise about this on social media, the FOIA emails prove that only 10 actual parents emailed in support of this bathroom policy, and only 2 actual parents, one being Yarber, spoke out at the school board meetings in support. This is hardly the majority. And I want to point out that most of those communications parroted the exact talking points from Yarber's post. The basis of the bathroom policy is rooted in Angela Yarber's religious views, personal bias, and drive to win votes. This information and timeline I shared with you has also been shared with the ACLU, which is so concerned about the ongoing discriminatory situation in our district, they have written the board 3 times in the past 12 months. This information is also being shared with the Department of Justice regarding the ongoing hostile educational environment towards minorities. In an email, Mr. Gogoleski even acknowledged that creating a new bathroom policy will very likely land the district in costly court lawsuits, stating that he, quote, was certain that there will be endless litigation brought about on both sides of this debate, end quote. It is clear that they know this will land the district in court, but they are ready to waste the taxpayers' money. Lastly, Michelle Blondell, school board member, who has sat in on extremist meetings with Angela Yarber in the past, stated publicly last week that she went so far as to call the ex-Moms for Liberty Livingston County lead, Jennifer Smith, to try and figure out a current contact for local Moms for Liberty people in order to have them organize to push this bathroom policy through. It should be noted that Moms for Liberty is connected to dangerous groups such as the Proud Boys, which is extremely concerning considering the literal Nazi demonstration that we had in Howell this last weekend. So, but then again, you don't believe that racism is an issue in Livingston County anymore. So I guess
You have to address the board as a whole. Thank you. Next up, Amber Fry. Please.
Hi there. So, quick intro here. The 2023-24 Hartland Consolidated School Staff Survey provided these important stakeholders a chance to weigh in on what leadership is and isn't working within the district. Half of the comments written on that survey, 11 pages worth, revealed rampant and teacher dissatisfaction, especially citing clean slate school board members Gogolewski, Blondeel, and Keller. Not one comment was in support of these three board members. After reading these comments, I felt it was important their words be included in the public record. So to follow, here are some more staff comments. We're following up on our comments from the last board meeting. This is just a continuation. This is not repeating ourselves. These are other unread ones. So, while differing perspectives are natural, it's essential to approach them constructively and professionally. Unfortunately, the hostile interactions and disrespectful behavior from certain board members and their supporters are unacceptable and counterproductive to our shared goal of providing quality education. This conduct creates an unsafe work environment and administration from focusing on student learning by forcing us to address unfounded criticisms and unreasonable requests. I feel supported by Mrs. Glaybach, Mr. Costa, Mrs. Shaw, and Mrs. Coleman. However, I find the time-wasting problems looking for a solution, self-indulgent, and selfish mannerisms of the board meetings themselves difficult to stomach. In addition, new policies being considered would make my everyday job more difficult to include all of my students, which is, in my opinion and experience, unethical, and the antithesis of purpose of the Board of Education. The lack of support is astounding. While I understand from their multiple declarations they were elected by the people, they were not elected to represent solely parents. Next. Some members of the current school board have personal agendas and choose to ignore the opinions of teachers and school administrators. There is no attempt made by them to directly communicate with teachers or to create the opportunity for dialogue. Next, the other four board members have been supportive and an advocate of the work we do. Until the entire board as a whole decides to work together for the education of our students, the most important goal, and not for their own self-interest, it will continue to be the toughest to continue the excellence we have built over the last 3 decades. Next. While I am currently a satisfied and proud employee of HCS, I do fear the changes some of the BOE may make to this wonderful place if they were to get their way. Next, if we are not careful, I feel that we will damage what we have been working towards to become and maintain our status as a premier school district if the political agendas of some of the BOE members become reality. Next, I'm concerned with some of the comments some board members have made at board meetings. Thank you so much.
Okay, next up is Lori. Do we have a microphone for the back of the room? Thank you, Mr. Marino.
One of the first things, I don't know. Yep, it is. There's rumors out there that someone on the school board will resign before the upcoming school election. Since a board member resigned right before the election 2 years ago and was immediately replaced by the remaining school board members. In my opinion, okay, this is my opinion, if this happens, it will confirm suspicions of a corruption within the board. They manipulate the situation to force resignations and then fill the positions with their own choices. This leaves the public with no real say in the matter. This is a real concern to me and should be for the rest of you Hartland voters. I am asking that when there is a vacancy on the board that you notify the public immediately and include the name of the candidate to which the board intends to appoint, and open the floor for nominations for the public. If it only takes one of you to make the motion and one other to second the motion, because the voters should have the input on who is appointed to the school board whenever there is a vacancy. Anyone right now in here, okay, in this room, if you agree with me, please stand now for our rights to be included in this decision. And this takes all of us as a community, whether you're on one side or the other, we're all supposed to be equal. And I just want to let you know, our voices need to be heard, because back, I know with the Constitution, we the people control the board, not you guys, and not one of you are listening to us. So you need to start listening to us, or we're not going to give up on this, because our rights matter. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Larry Parsons.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you. First thing I want to start off by saying is that we do need a bathroom policy, that we need to keep our girls safe. And if there's extremists that want to keep pushing these far left agendas, let them push them in a different school district. This is Hartland, and these nutty San Francisco policies aren't welcome here. Now, it's come to my attention that a police report has been filed. Right, this police report that I'm holding was filed by a Deputy King. Right, a township school board member filed this police report. That would be on 6/25/24. So and it reads like this: I responded to blank in Genoa Township for a threats complaint. The caller, Cindy Shaw, identified herself as a Hartland School Board member and advised that there was a male, Larry Parsons, that would be me, who was saying terrible things about her. The contact with Cindy Shaw at blank, I spoke with Ms. Shaw about her situation involving Larry Parsons. She advised me that Mr. Parsons had been responding to her Facebook posts in an unhealthy manner, and it was concerning. Per Ms. Shaw, the most recent responses comments were the posts on her Facebook account, Cindy Shaw for Hartland Consolidated School Boards. Ms. Shaw said that the respondents' comments on her post from Mr. Parsons have been going on for over a year and a half, and that it had been to a point she felt necessary to contact police for a report. Ms. Shaw confirmed that none of the responses' comments were threatening and just him not agreeing with her stances. In the end, Ms. Shaw knew that Mr. Parsons was not doing anything criminal. She just wanted to finally document that something was going on. Ms. Shaw was given a business card and a complaint number of the report. And then after that, it's just contact with me, where I state that I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. The school board members should know and understand that the police officers or sheriffs in this community work to protect the people from criminals, not waste public funds on vendettas. Shame on Cindy Shaw.
Next up is Kelly.
Hello. I'm continuing the staff comments from the survey. So much time is spent at our board meetings looking for ways to exclude certain students. Over the course of the last year and even before, we've seen discussions and policies pertaining to whether or not the district should be supporting our special education students, our non-white students, our queer students, our school of choice students. We are a public school, and the public means everyone. Education doesn't happen in a vacuum. It takes a team of committed individuals, parents, teachers, admin support staff, all working hard together to meet the needs of our students. How can we do this when nearly half of our board seeks to disregard a sizable portion of the families we serve? Next, it is absolutely embarrassing to see news stories about the hate that comes from 3 of our board and our board meetings in general. As a regular participant, watching the level of disrespect, grandstanding, and attempts at trickery is gut-wrenching and unprofessional. It's reprehensible to see the personal social media accounts of sitting board members and hopefuls spouting hate against anyone who lives here that might be different from them. Next, if we are not careful, I fear that we will damage what we have been working toward to become and maintain our status as a premier school district if some of the political agendas of some of the BOE members become a reality. Next, school board needs to stop focusing on political agendas and focus on making Hartland schools a better place for all kids. Next, I am disappointed with the insensitivity of 3 board members, Glenn, Greg, and Michelle. They have decided to take the child out of education and to attack staff and the district admin over issues that do not impact student learning. It is obvious that they would rather make this a political process and paint the picture that the district is not performing and caring for every student. Stop your tearing down antics. Next, the Board of Education is at odds and is splintering the district. The overall morale is low and the district is already and will continue to lose good employees. Next, I will continue to be concerned about the direction of the school board. There are many members who do not understand the work we do day to day and focus on issues that aren't even happening in our schools. It is difficult to attend meetings because of the inaccuracy of comments, because of little understanding of what is actually happening in our schools. Next. Mr. Hughes and the entire admin team have done an incredible job leading this district. That being said, it is very disheartening to have some members, albeit a minority, of the school board that seem bent on undermining the progress the district has made. Speaking on behalf of the vast majority of my teacher colleagues, we support the work they are doing and the direction this administration is taking us. Unfortunately, we have 3 school board members that encourage a segment of the public to verbally bash Mr. Hughes and team without factual information. Thank you.
Next up is Barbara Tonkovich.
Thank you once again for letting me speak. Whatever happened to the human race? What we regard as thinkable and unthinkable about how we treat human life has changed drastically in the West. For centuries, Western culture has regarded human life and the quality of the life of the individual as special. It has been common to speak of the sanctity of human life. For instance, the Hippocratic Oath, which goes back more than 2,000 years, has traditionally been taken by the graduates of American medical schools at the time of their commencement. The Declaration of Geneva, adopted in September of 1948 by the General Assembly of the World Medical Organization and modeled closely on the Hippocratic Oath, became used as a graduation oath by medical schools. It includes, "I maintain the utmost respect for human life from the time of conception." This concept of the preservation of human life has been the basis of the medical profession and society in general. When the University of Pittsburgh changed from the Hippocratic Oath to the Declaration of Geneva in 1971, the students deleted "from the time of conception" from the clause. The Hippocratic Oath takes us back to the time of the Greeks, but the fully developed concept of the sanctity of life that we have known did not come from Greek thought and culture, but from Judeo-Christian worldview, which dominated the West for centuries. Biblical doctrine was preached not as a truth, but as the truth, and formed not only the religious base of society, but the cultural, legal, and governmental basis as well. As a total worldview, it answered the major questions of peoples have asked over the centuries. Who is God? What is he like? It also gave answers to the questions of who are we as people? How ought we to live together? What meaning does human life have? And this Judeo-Christianity formed a general cultural consensus. It provided the basic moral and social values by which things were judged though never perfectly applied, did lay a foundation for a high view of human life in concept and practice. Knowing biblical values, people viewed human life as unique, to be protected and loved, because each individual is created in the image of God. This stands in great contrast to Roman culture, which practiced both abortion and infanticide, while Christian societies have considered these to be murder, and what now with mutilation of children. Until recently in our own century, human beings have generally been regarded as special, unique, and non-expendable. But in one short generation, we have moved from a generally high view of life to a very low one. Why has our society changed? The answer is clear. The consensus of our society no longer rests on a Judeo-Christian base, but rather on a humanistic one, which makes man the measure of all things. It puts man rather than God at the center. This was in 1974, the year after I graduated from high school, by Everett C. Koop. If you remember, he was candidate for the United States Supreme Court. Thank you very much.
Next up is Ella Nikitin.
So I have a saying that I've used, it doesn't have to be, I have a saying when dealing with certain types of people. It doesn't have to be true. You just have to say it enough times and people will believe it. And what we are seeing in this previous school board meeting is a certain group of people holding on to a certain worldview that they have, and when the facts come flying in that this worldview might not necessarily be as accurate as they initially thought, they make up new facts and speculate. What am I talking about? I'm talking about after the comments were read, the teacher comments were read during the last board meeting, some people decided to push the narrative that it was just a small minority of disgruntled teachers and, colluding together, and, all of the, true patriots or whatever are, just afraid to speak out. This is what I call speculation and wishful thinking on your part. So let me give you some facts. 88 people responded to the survey. Half of them were not very positive about the new board members. Half of them. That's more people than were sitting in this room before all those people left. So don't tell me that this is just a small minority of disgruntled staff members. In addition, this survey is anonymous. That's right, anonymous, like actually anonymous. So those are the two facts. Now, of course, this won't change anyone's mind, but those are the facts here. Now that that's out of the way, I do want to mention something. I don't know if you remember this, but back in December of last year, Mrs. Blondeel made a promise to me that there would be an equal number of male, female, and gender-neutral bathrooms. You made this promise. We have it on video. I would actually like to see this promise fulfilled. And yes, you made that promise. Don't look at me like that. So yes, I would like to see this promise come to fruition. More gender-neutral bathrooms at this school would be great.
And next up is Terry.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm also continuing with the teachers' surveys. The ridiculous actions by the school board in public meetings has been an embarrassment. They say they want to control the curriculum, but don't even know what the curriculum says or how we integrate it into a classroom. Next, I am concerned about the direction that some of the BOE members want to take the district in some of their comments. For instance, just teach the curriculum shows a lack of understanding of what our jobs entail. Also, the conspiracy theories about the superintendent and the president of the board hiding information are ridiculous and make some of the board members appear hostile and lacking in knowledge. Next, I used to be very proud to be a Hartland teacher, but with the antics of our current board, I am sometimes embarrassed to admit I teach in Hartland. This has nothing to do with anything else but some of our school board members. Next, it seems clear that they work hard to gather people to speak at board meetings in an effort to undermine the work of the district. It is obvious that they would rather make this a political process and paint the picture that the district is not performing and caring for every student. This is just ridiculous if they knew anything about education. This comes across as not supporting me and my peers in the hard work we are doing every day with our students. You are not representing the district as a whole like the other 4 board members do. Next, I am also thankful for Mr. Minsker, Mr. Van Epps, and Mr. Hughes for continuously defending and protecting best practices for students. Despite constant pushback, they continue to stand firm and do what is best for staff and students. Although I feel supported by my administration and my colleagues, I do not feel that all current members of the school board are truly invested in supporting Hartland students, marginalized students in particular. Next, there are times when the board meetings and a minority of people might negatively reflect our hard work and day-to-day operations, but I feel completely supported by my colleagues and administrators in the building. Next, more than anything, I hope we can create a place of learning where minority students feel safe despite the intentions of the school board. Next, it is a sad day for Livingston County and for Hartland in particular. The hatred and bigotry in this community is mind-boggling. It is crucial that the administration supports their employees and families by providing equitable instruction and recognizing the value of all students. It was particularly disheartening to watch dedicated, gifted educators be destroyed by the hateful members of this community, and particularly without support of the administration.
And last up tonight is Karen Gregg.
Good evening. We've been hearing from our fantastic, professional, highly qualified teachers tonight about what they see and feel from the board and community members. I came to share what I see as a taxpayer and Hartland voter. I see a once highly respected, nonpartisan school board become political and culture war focused instead of education focused. This board has spent the better part of the last year and a half talking more about the gender identity of students than the education of their brains. I see supposedly nonpartisan school board candidates participating in political events and proudly supporting extremist views. As a voter, I should not know the political views of nonpartisan candidates. I see a board member place on their personal Facebook page a meme with young German children holding swastikas above a picture of American children holding rainbow flags in a classroom, with the words to the effect of, train them while they're young. Also a profile picture saying, teachers, leave them kids alone. Yet when presented with the low morale and comments of teachers, the comment from the board member was, I'm not sure what I could change. I see a board member candidate who, instead of condemning the behavior of the hateful racist display in Howell yesterday, spun it into a conspiracy theory because the degenerates support their preferred political candidate. Again, I should not know who a nonpartisan supports politically. I see a current board member on a local political podcast, which 2 board members had been censured for participating in previously, to justify why she had to follow the law and not the whims and wishes of the podcasters. I see the term parental rights being used often. This term is actually code for destroy public education. Parents have always had the right and duty to participate in the education of their children. Volunteer in the classroom to see what is actually going on instead of getting your information from social media. I see the need for Hartland residents to do your homework and research, to elect education-focused, not chaos, and politically focused candidates to this board, so it can return to its nonpartisan, teacher-supporting education focus of the past. We are Hartland, and we are better than this, and our students deserve more. Thank you.
So ends call to the public. Next up, item 1G, committee and building reports. Let's start over here. Mrs. Blondeel.
I was not in a committee meeting, so I don't have anything to report on that. And I will state that a lot of that was just said were lies. I'm done.
Thank you. Mr. Keller.
I did not have any committee meetings this past month and did not have any building meetings as well, but I just want to let the rest of the board know that I've been working with President Glaybach on the placements for this coming school year, and I think they're almost finalized, so hopefully I can get that sent out to everybody here in the next week or so.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Costa.
I have nothing. I'm all set.
Mrs. Shaw.
Kristen and I attended a building and site committee meeting a few weeks ago with Mr. Hughes and his team. A lot of it was already covered in the bond report update and regarding the update to transportation, which you have mentioned already. And I am glad that we'll be doing a public meeting to sort of address comments. And the last thing I wanted to, well, first of all, I wanted to congratulate Mrs. Gregory on your promotion. Thank you for all you've done. Thank you. Glad to have you up here. The last thing I wanted to mention is we are gearing up for year 2 of the Hartland Art Walk. It can't be Hartland Art Walk unless we have art. And of course, we accept student art and, art from old people like us too. So check out Hartland Art Walk, and to get details on entering, the kickoff is September 21st at Settlers Park. We'll have music, food trucks, so heartlandartwalk.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. Let's see. So yeah, I attended that same building and site committee meeting, and most of that's already been addressed. I also attended the Senior Center Advisory Council on July 10th. In closing out the fiscal year, Kim Konarski, who runs the center, noted that there were almost 23,000 fitness class attendees. That's how many visits there were for the whole fiscal year, compared to about 19,000 the year before. So it's pretty impressive to know that those classes are so well attended, and that's also considering there was a raise in those fees. And so I'm glad to know that hasn't impacted the attendance, and then also our income or the revenue for the center has increased as well. Let's see, there will be an open house on Thursday, September 5th. And then I believe there is a free week of fun following that open house. So if you are interested in becoming a member, this is the week to check it out. September 5th is when it kicks off. You can check out all the facilities, use the new tables that they just received in the main room, take a fitness class, play pool. There's a pool table with, I believe, a second pool table coming soon. There's pickleball courts and all sorts of activities. There's also a lot of things that they do off outside of the center itself. So there are trips and activities that go on, there are performances, all sorts of things that are going on. There's also going to be a 50th anniversary celebration coming up, I believe, also in September. Those tickets will go on sale in early September, so check that out as well. I hear there's going to be dueling pianos there for the event. Let's see, I also had the pleasure of participating in the Hartland Foundation and the HCS Foundation committee meetings just this morning. I feel like I haven't seen enough of Rachel and Chuck and Renee today. But all the grant requests that were submitted were approved as usual for those community groups. So that's supporting the Messiah, supporting community life, the senior center, and other things like that. So that's all I have for that. All right, moving on to item 2A. Before anyone reads this motion, we do have 3 separate proposals. The next one. Or is that the next? Yeah, that's the next. Oh, sorry, my bad. I'm jumping ahead. Okay, 2A, parent-student handbooks.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent and the assistant superintendent of personnel and student services, approves all 2024-25 parent-student handbook changes as presented.
Support.
A motion by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mr. Costa. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yes, I'd like to comment. I did send the board some, some concerns I had with at least one change that was proposed, which was on page 20 in our packet regarding the anti-harassment and sexual harassment section, which would apply to all handbooks. And while I'm supportive of the potential disclosure if and when, if there's an agreement that is reached with the Department of Justice and if ultimately the board votes to go with, whatever the DOJ is requesting, and that is part of it, I fully support that we should make everybody aware. That includes the students, the parents, and everybody in the community. But my concern is with the way it's written, it's basically stipulating that we will do it, and I think it's a little bit of cart before horse in this situation. So as I suggested in my email to the board, I want to move to amend the proposed changes on page 20 to read, district investigations and reports of harassments may be subject to disclosure by the U.S. Department of Justice and may not be protected by FERPA and FOIA regulations.
And Greg, what is it? Because the wording, you're changing something to may, correct? Like, what are you?
Yeah, so the only change is it changes the word are to may be. And again, to support the fact that we may do that if in fact we reach this agreement. So again, it puts the disclosure out there, but it's not saying we are going to do it yet because that agreement hasn't been made. So that's my proposal to the board.
Absolutely.
Greg, I think that's a good change, to be honest with you. I think the reality is every investigation we do may not be reportable anyway, right? So maybe is really the better way. So I appreciate you catching that. That's actually the best way to do it. So I appreciate that.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the changes as presented? Okay, hearing none. For the 2024-25 parent-student handbooks, Mrs. Shaw.
And that is with the change that Greg suggested.
Yes, you're right. With the requested amendment to change are to maybe on page 20 in that section A.
Correct.
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Blondil.
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion carries. Okay, item 2B. Addition to secondary parent-student handbook, bathroom protocol. This is the one where we have 3 options. We'll take option A first. We can discuss as needed, but we'll vote. When we vote, we'll vote on option A first, then vote on option B, then vote on option C if one doesn't pass. we'll go to the next. It's kind of like we did with the nominations, same parliamentary procedure for that. So I open it to discussion.
I move that the Board of Education approves the bathroom protocol, option A, for the 2024-25 secondary parent-student handbook as presented.
Motion by Mrs. Shaw.
I second.
Oh. Support by Blondillo. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, because I mean, we just have, that gives us the opportunity to talk about it and then vote on it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, hearing any discussion?
I do. So, I like the policy. This is some of the stuff that's added in here is kind of like in our, in all of our bylaws. So that's why this one for me is not the one that I'm going to choose. But I like the idea of expanding it. But this is it's got too much in it as far as, harassment. So, thank you.
I've got a couple questions. Personally, I don't feel any of these protocols are appropriate nor necessary, but I guess I have a question for Kate, I guess potentially for you. I know down in the bottom there it talks about this case-by-case wraparound meeting. And I know I asked at the last meeting, but it talks about who would be, it's because it's confidential. So students, parents, guardians, meeting administrators, counselors, school social workers, psychologists, and then it says necessary school personnel. I have to ask, the Board of Education, can someone clarify, is not school personnel? Can Kate, can you clarify that, Mr. Hughes?
I probably should clarify that. Did you mind me? All right, Kate. And by the way, welcome to, I'm sorry, I missed that at the beginning. So currently, and we look at this currently this is what we do. Currently, we have these meetings with children and their parents. We talk about the situation, talk about where they're at, talk about what the opportunities are, and we leave that within the confines of that confidential conversation. And when we talk about the counselors, they may be working with their counselor regularly. If they're working with their social worker, they may be privy to that information. But this is not a situation where we would create a list and share it with the board or share it with anybody. This is not for everybody to know. This is that child and that family's right to be able to keep that information within the realm that we only know if we need to know.
Okay, because I know I brought up the last meeting, so to clarify again, school board members are not school personnel.
Correct.
Okay.
I think for me, for this, I am happy with the first bullet point, the second part of that paragraph that was added, and also to sort of operationalize sort of what we're doing already. Option B doesn't have enough information in it for me. I think it's too vague. And option C, basically stating that the board, would be, we would be notified. Based on what Mr. Hughes said and the role of the Board of Education, I do not feel that that is appropriate. So I think A, based on conversations I have had with stakeholders and families, principals, Mr. Hughes, I think option A, I think is the best way to put in as many guardrails that we can for students and administrators and for families. So I think option A, I think includes everything that we sort of all have talked about as a board collectively.
I know nobody else got to talk yet, but I had a follow-up question. Did we, because I know at one of our committees, we talked about converting a bathroom on each floor to like a gender neutral. Is that going to happen by the fall?
That is complete. Matt has, we have created at the high school a unisex restroom on the third floor with a vacancy lock on it that any child can use, any child, regardless of your identity. There are two on the second floor, nurse's station and counseling office, and one on the first floor across from the media center. Again, these will have locks on them that shows vacancy. There's cameras situated near them so we can watch who's going in and out. We'll have vape detectors on them so that they can't just go in and shut the door and vape. So we'll have that very clearly established. Again, creating unisex restrooms on each level of the high school. Also at the middle school, there will be one unisex restroom at the front of the building and one at the back of the building, again with the same situation, so that any student who needs to feel comfortable can use that restroom, regardless of what you identify. That's just making it available for everybody.
And so you said that there's, at the high school, third floor, on all floors, there'll be one. Okay, okay.
Two on second.
And I think the third paragraph where it states any student who has a need or desire, I think that's what's important for me is for it to say, not a student that looks like that or believes that or is that, it's any student has the ability, who has the need or desire for increased privacy, has that right. And I thank you very much for getting the gender-neutral bathrooms done as well. Thank you.
I guess if you guys are, do you want to, you go ahead. I'm running the show. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thanks, Cindy. I listened to what you said, and I'm in agreement with you on A. So thank you for that.
I just kind of want to clarify. So this is going in the handbook, right? It's not an actual policy, correct? And it applies to 7 through 12 only, correct? So there would be no, I'll say, guardrails for any visitors or non-students as this is written today? Is that correct?
I guess when you say visitors, if people are in the building, if people are in the building for athletic events and things like that, the reality is no different than an airport or no different than a Walmart or a restaurant. You have a very difficult time monitoring that piece of it. This policy is for the students during the day, and of course, if they're at school events, right? No, there's not a guardrail in here for people that come in to participate in events and things like that. There is not.
Okay.
This is about students. This is a student handbook. I think I should also mention, as you all started having these conversations and we started working with all of the information that was sent to us, worked with our attorneys, certainly paid attention to the ACLU letters that were noted earlier. We felt that, as we were trying to do this, what does it look like that is very consistent with what we are currently doing? And what we found was we were currently doing these things, but there seemed to be this misguided notion in the public that anybody and everybody can use any restroom they want anywhere in the building. And the reality is that wasn't true. The reality was that if I chose to use a restroom that I wasn't supposed to be in, and there was no knowledge of me having had any conversation with anybody, having any conversation with anybody to let them know where I stood, then I was going to be disciplined like I would have been 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago, right? Like that still exists in our schools. And we wanted to make it very clear in here that at the bottom, it's very clear that there is guidance from the Michigan State Board of Education on the fact that if I am not genuine in what I choose, and I'm going to use that as an excuse to go in the restroom and cause a havoc, I'm going to be disciplined. That's the reality, and that's the reality we've been operating on from day one, and then that's not changed. And when this issue first came about, gosh, I'm going to say 8 years ago, it was on a case-by-case basis, which we have always done to respect each and every child and each and every family to ensure that we are providing the best environment we could for all children and treating people with dignity, humility, whatever you want to call it. So we thought that this policy, in working through it, and there's been lots of conversation at lots of different people, that this was at least taken into account how we do things now and letting the public know that there clearly is not this opportunity to come and use whatever rest you want just because you want to. It's not true. There's not truth to that.
I'll chime in my 2 cents here too, echoing some of what Cindy had said. Out of the 3 options, I think A is probably the most acceptable for me. I think I was actually the author of option B, but knowing that I knew what our current practices were to protect the student privacy and all of that, but because it was already in place, I didn't include it in my version, but that's been added to version A. There are a couple of small typos in version A that I would want to fix as well, but version C is a hard no for me. I think some of it is outright illegal, and we need to stay in our lane as board members and as a school district. I don't think that is appropriate at all. So with a few typo corrections, I think A would be the best of the three for me.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I would say probably not thrilled with any of them, frankly. But I think having something is a step in the right direction. So for that, I'd consider option A. But, I'm not going to be celebrating, frankly.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this? Okay, so.
I just want to say thanks, everybody, for your support. I appreciate the thoughtful input.
Of course. Let's see, so for the addition to secondary parent-student handbook, bathroom protocol, option A is on the floor. Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
No.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mrs. Blondeel?
Yes.
I'm a yes. That passes. Moving on to revised policy 1241, non-reemployment of the superintendent.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of Greg Keller, approves revised policy 1241 as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mr. Keller. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, so I guess in this particular situation, I've had some offline comments with various members of the board, and I appreciate those of you who did reach out to seek clarification. I think in this particular situation, due to some conversations I had specifically with President Glaybach, who's unable to be here, I think there are a few things that would like to tweak. So I would actually like to move to postpone this vote. So I move to postpone vote for policy 1241.
Okay, help me with procedure. We already have a motion on the floor. We have to vote on the motion to postpone before.
I believe you're supposed to deal with the motions as they come in, is the protocol.
I have a
So
Chris, do you know?
that's what I
I'm
believe
trying to
to be
think
true.
through, someone would have to second Greg's motion to postpone, and then would we vote on the postponement and then revert back to the original motion?
Can you tell us what the tweaks or edits are that you plan on making?
Well, I mean, again, I was working through them with President Glaybach, but I think one of them had to do with the length of contract. So again, she's not here to speak for herself, so I guess out of courtesy to Megan, I'd like to have that opportunity to try to make some tweaks to see if it's something that the board may find palatable.
Again, I think you have to deal with the motions as they are on the table, and if the first motion passes, it passes. And Greg, you would have the right to bring that up at a later date, to say, no, I want to bring this up again and talk about it. If the motion fails, then you again have the same right to bring it up at a later date to say, hey, we need to put this back on the discussion item. But I believe the rules are that you have to deal with the motions as they are in order.
I believe so, since I read the motion. That was first.
But I think it's considered a subsidiary motion, which then would take
Kristen's looking
precedent from
to
the
it.
main motion.
Yeah, but mine doesn't tell me that detail. Motions which apply.
Would it have been the appropriate time before we approve the agenda to ask to have it removed? Would that have mattered?
Well, I mean, yes, that could have happened. And another option would be to initially read an alternate motion.
Yeah, I mean, Kristen, you and I talked right before the meeting, and I mentioned this possibility, and I think based on your suggestion to wait until
Yeah,
it
to
came
read.
up, so I did not follow the other option, which would have been to change the agenda.
Right. And
so that-
I think, but to avoid the issue that we're in now, if you would have read the alternate motion before Cindy read the original, then we would probably be okay. But
Sorry, again, though, based on Robert's rules, an amendment or postpone is a subsidiary motion which should take priority over a main motion.
Okay.
Just like when we amend, we've done that already tonight, right? So, and that takes the precedent
Okay.
over the main motion?
I see here, at mine here, it says subsidiary motion, change or affect how to handle a main motion. And then it says vote on this before the main motion.
there you
So
go.
we have to vote,
Correct.
On the subsidiary
we have to
before
vote
we vote on the
for
main.
Greg's.
Okay, so the current motion on the table is to postpone item 2C, revised policy 1241. Is there any further discussion?
I second.
Sorry. All right, so that is motion by Mr. Keller, second by Mrs. Blondio to postpone. Okay, any discussion? Further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Mrs. Shaw?
No.
Mr. Costa?
No.
Mr. Keller? This is motion to
Yes.
postpone. Mrs. Blondio?
Yes.
I would be a yes, but that is not 4 votes. So, motion to postpone does not carry, and we go back to the original motion. That one has already been proposed by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mr. Keller, and that motion is to address the revised policy of 1241, non-reemployment of the superintendent. Since we are not postponing, is there any further discussion?
Yes. I have had a chance to do some research and looking into, in addition to what the Michigan Association of School Boards sent to the board, I've found a few other things, including something by Robert Libka from Western Illinois University. There are many, many things out there that correlate the length of superintendent service to student outcome. And, if we're looking at facts and if we're here for student outcome and to improve student scores and student outcome and stability for our community, administrators, teachers, families, I don't see any reason why we would want to limit the contract of a superintendent. If the length of a superintendent in his position or her position equals improved student outcome, after studying 10 years of data from 440 school districts serving 1,051,681 students and completing numerous statistical analysis, the relationship between superintendent longevity and student achievement remained positive and at times statistically significant. So for me, I don't want to put any limitations on the right person in the right job. It's the most important position that we have in this district, the leader of our school district, and I don't want to put any limitations on a contract for it, especially if we know it can be related to student outcome.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yeah, I have some comments. So I don't think this is directly related to the current superintendent. I think this is just an overall an understanding that if you have a 5-year contract, you act differently than you do if you're wanting to renew your 3-year contract. I don't think that the board should enter a 5-year contract with anybody on behalf of the community because that's a long time. That's a long time that anybody would be acting under contract. So if anything happens, I just feel like we have less power to do something. Again, it's not about any one person, and if somebody's doing a great job after 3 years, then they get another 3-year contract. I don't see extending it another 2 years is going to
Well, I
have
think
any.
the board can terminate superintendent contract at any time, right?
For just cause.
Correct. There's always a way out, I guess, of a contract. But for me, if the purpose of me sitting here is what can we do to improve student outcome, to have better student scores, so student success, if it can be related to who sits in that position, whether it's 5 years from now or 50 years from now, to me, that's what's most important.
But I failed to see, because I wasn't finished with my comment, but I failed to see what the 2 years would do for anybody. If we get a 3-year contract, you have a 3-year contract. We vote on it every year and extend that 3-year contract. So there's always this flow through of 3-year contract. And again, I just, in my business and in my opinion, as a businesswoman, I think 5-year contract is long for anybody.
Well, I think naturally too, the fact that we have a team here, it's not just one individual, right? We have a team who's supported by admin members. They have a 3-year contract, and as Trustee Blondeel pointed out, our practice has been every year we take a look at the contract and then we continue to add a year back. So it's always a 3-year deal. So with respect to longevity, even if we accept the study, which, I haven't read the study you're citing, so I can't speak to that, but just in general, I don't see the risk of longevity unless you're suggesting that there's a risk for the admin team because they don't have a 5-year deal. Given that we're always adding a year, it, by its nature, would tend to push contracts to be shorter because you don't have to wonder after 5 years, are they going to hire me? There's going to be each year a second, an option to consider that and look at it. So to me, longevity really doesn't come into play here with a 5-year versus 3-year. And again, I think what better way to say that you're a team if you're all operating under the same contract length and terms. I mean, that's, we're all wearing one Hartland shirt. Let's act that way. I think it's a concern for the taxpayers if for some reason a board came in at any point in the future and there's a 5-year deal that suddenly has to get paid out. I don't see how that helps the students because we're taking money that would be allocated towards teachers, supplies, everything that the district needs to run. And if we just gave a single person in the district potentially north of $1 million because maybe there was a bad hiring decision or maybe that person doesn't fit the culture of Hartland and we decided, as a board that we wanted to move on from that person. Again, I don't see where we as a district, as a community benefit from having that potential financial risk out there. We're a small community, and as we see, right, we don't get the kind of bond monies from the community that maybe some of the others do when they go to the taxpayers and say we want to ask for a mill. We don't generate the same kind of funds. So I think, again, it's fiduciary responsibility. We should be trying to protect the tax base. And, frankly, from a recruitment standpoint, I think, our history has been, and it's a great thing that we sort of pull from within. And so if we had a vacancy, I think there would not be any difference to an existing admin member who went from a current 3-year contract to a new 3-year contract, except for now they're superintendent, right? And again, they're all sort of on the same team and have the same terms of their contract. So again, I don't see why we need to have a potential, big boat anchor or liability to the community out there. So, and with respect to the other piece of the contract is that, I think we've seen in the past where prior to elections, it's not technically a lame duck session, but, outgoing board members could potentially, have a golden, set the superintendent up for a golden parachute. And again, I'm not saying that's happened, but it could happen. And why would we want to leave that as a possibility when it's something that we can reasonably forecast for and try to protect the district and the tax base against? And again, so for all those reasons, I am in support of this policy.
Well, my opinion on this would be stability. I mean, kids thrive on stability, districts thrive on stability. I mean, I don't recall the exact data, but in Oakland County, I think in the last year, there's like half of the districts have a new superintendent because it's not a sought after thing, quite frankly. And if you get someone good, and I don't want to compare us to Brighton down the street because we're not, they just gave their superintendent a 5-year contract, and by no means would our superintendent be any less than that. But if you have someone and they're good and you want to provide stability, I don't see why we would kind of lock ourselves into this where if Mr. Hughes, when he does go off and find his way, we go to try to find someone else, and let's say Brighton's superintendent position opens up and they're willing to give him a 4-year contract. Well, if you're looking for stability, why would he choose this? So I'm not for it because of those reasons. I'm interested to hear what your tweaks are if this does not pass. But
So would you consider if we left it at 5 years, but we left the clause about no contracts within 6 months of a general election?
no, and again, I saw that, and that realistically is for the state superintendent. I mean, we're talking about a local superintendent here. We're talking about Hartland. This isn't Lansing. He's not overseeing the state of Michigan. It's a nonpartisan position we're sitting in, and we should do everything we can to give whoever sits here the best contract we can. So I'm not for that language either.
So if I understand correctly, though, you think that the state superintendent who governs a much wider area should have a smaller contract than the local school district?
I think the state superintendent's position is quite different than a local superintendent's position. I think the job they deal with day to day is completely different. So be it for the state. As far as here in Hartland, I'm not for it.
Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Voting on revised policy 1241, non-reemployment of the superintendent. Mrs. Shaw.
No.
Mr. Costa.
No.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Blondil.
I'm a yes.
I am a no. That does not pass. Item 2D, School Bond Loan Fund.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer, approves the School Loan Revolving Fund annual application as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mrs. Shaw, support by Mr. Costa. Is there any discussion?
Rachel, do you want to jump in and share a little bit?
Sure. This is just our annual application to participate in the School Bond Loan Fund. We've been doing this for many, 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 many years. We are currently in repayment status, which means we are currently instead of borrowing from that fund, we are in the process of repaying. This resolution here is just acknowledging that, giving you an estimate of what that repayment amount is, and just basically acknowledging that the school board is going to follow the rules of the program per se. And we do that annually, and that's what this is here for.
What's the penalty if we don't get this in place?
Withholding state aid.
Oh, that's all. Oh.
No pressure.
No pressure. No pressure. Due August 1st, so.
Okay. Yes. Is there any discussion or any questions for Rachel? Okay. School Bond Loan Fund. Mrs. Shaw.
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Blondil.
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion passes. Item 2E, teacher evaluation process.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent, Assistant Superintendent of Personnel and Student Services, approves the negotiated teacher evaluation instrument as presented.
Motion by Mr. Costa, support by Mrs. Shaw. Before I hand it over to discussion, I asked Mr. Hughes to be prepared just to give us a little more context around the form or the how it's changed and what the implications are.
So basically, again, this goes back to the non-bargainables, the para policies that the state legislators and the governor decided that we're going to be taken off the non-bargainables and back into the bargainable realm. The association has a right to request a bargain. They asked to bargain about the evaluation instrument. So what we did is we looked at our current instrument, kind of like the MASB did, same thing, adjusted it from 4 categories to 3, which you now see as effective, developing, and needing support. Adjusted the worksheet to make sure that effective is a 3, developing is a 2, and a 1 for needs support. And basically did the work together. I believe Laura's here. This passed the TA. The TA is a tentative agreement. I think it was 95% or 99, something like that. Really high percent of the membership saying they're good with this instrument. They've always liked the instrument. And this is just a very small tweak, so we don't have to go back and readjust everything and go through all the research-based stuff that we would have had to gone through. So it stays consistent with how we've been doing business. And the teachers agreed that it's a good instrument. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or any further questions? Okay, hearing none. Teacher evaluation process. Mrs. Shaw.
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Blondil.
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion carries. Item 2F, playground equipment purchase, 51 building.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent and the Director of Community Education, approves the playground equipment purchase as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mrs. Shaw, support by Mr. Costa. Is there any discussion?
And just for the board knows, I believe this is grant money. So this is grant money to the 51 child care program. And so they've chosen to add to their playground equipment out there. And Matt was involved in that. And as soon as we can get this going, the sooner we can get this equipment installed and the kids are playing on it.
Building 51 does not have a PTO, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Playground equipment purchase for the 51 building. Mrs. Shaw.
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Blondil.
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion carries. Item 3A for discussion, Hartland Consolidated Schools Strategic Plan. This was an item that came up from our recent discussions doing the superintendent evaluation, and it was presented to us as an option for something that would benefit the district and the work of the school board and kind of provide, using a word from earlier, guardrails for our decisions that we make here at the table that affect the district. This is just one proposal that we can consider. If you have any questions or need any follow-up information, we can pursue that between now and the next meeting.
And I've already let President Glaybach too know that I'd like to maybe look at a few other options, or, you know, maybe MASB is great, but maybe looking at a few different options that we can use instead of just looking at one, and maybe look at a couple of others. So I've already let her know I'd like to look into that with her.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think it's great because I do strategic planning, and I do think there needs to be a couple changes so that we can really track it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Let's see, item 4A, future meetings. This is, it says proposed here on our agenda, but now that is official. Our next meeting will be August 19th at 6:30 here in the boardroom. Item 4B, any informational items?
Can I share one?
Sure.
So now that you have your committee assignments, we are working on developing goals using some of the information that I obtained during the evaluation process to make sure that those goals were a little bit more benchmarkable, I guess you would say. So we'll need to, I'll need to start pulling committees so that we can start having those conversations, so we can get them in place so that they're adopted by, usually October is usually when we get everything set. So just so you all are aware, I'll start reaching out to you to set up times and dates, okay?
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, if there's nothing else, then we are adjourned. Thank you.